What if one of the oldest civilizations on Earth depicted its gods as beings you could see, approach, and remember in vivid detail? This question ignites a narrative that is hard to ignore. The Sumerians didn't just leave behind fleeting legends. They left behind archives, clay tablets filled with descriptions. Within those lines, the Anunnaki emerge not as abstract concepts, but as radiant beings with form, presence, and for those captivated by history, power, belief, and the unseen structures that underpin civilization. This is no trivial mystery. These descriptions were not crafted by careless storytellers, but were meticulously recorded by scribes, trained men of discipline. They chronicled grain, contracts, offerings, land boundaries, celestial events, and temple accounts with precision. When these scribes describe beings surrounded by blinding brilliance, the records shift from mere myth to the real tension lies not in whether every ancient claim should be interpreted literally, but in what it reveals about a civilization that measured the world with such care. If they described the divine in a controlled language, what were they attempting to preserve in clay? To grasp the significance of this question, one must step away from the tablets and enter the world that birthed them. Southern Mesopotamia was a harsh landscape, flat and exposed. The horizon stretched endlessly, and the rivers brought both life and peril. The Tigris and Euphrates could nourish the soil, but they could just as easily obliterate what people built. Flood and drought were constants, and survival was never assured. Yet, amidst this challenge, the rise of Sumer feels extraordinary. In a realm that should have resisted permanence, people established roots. They organized labor, dug canals, built temples, and raised cities, transforming instability into structure. The earliest of these cities, Eridu, was revered as the point from which kingship descended from the heavens. Even if interpreted symbolically, this notion of authority deriving from above remains significant. Power, sacred presence, and order were intertwined from the very beginning. Archaeological discoveries deepen this understanding. At Eridu, excavators uncovered a long succession of temple constructions at the same sacred site, spanning an astonishing breadth of time. Such continuity suggests a belief that the center of their world resided there. Other cities bore similar gravity in diverse ways. Uruk flourished into a vast center of power. Nippur became a sacred hub, associated with Enlil, embodying a form of authority that was both political and theological. Mesopotamian temples were not mere decorative monuments. They were treated as residences. Offerings were made on set schedules, garments provided, and rooms meticulous. The divine was not merely admired, it was hosted. This does not confirm that gods physically resided in these temples, but it illustrates how the builders perceived presence. They organized their resources around it, integrating it into the fabric of urban life. With a civilization structured around divine presence, another question emerges. Who were the men entrusted to turn that presence into lasting words? Enter the scribes who transform everything. In Mesopotamia, they were trained in the Ejuba, the tablet houses, where writing was a discipline, not an inspiration. Each student entered this world to become precise. Sign after sign, list after list, they recorded grain allocations, labor rosters, debts, legal formulas, and land boundaries, embodying the exactness that these scribes were not careless writers, drifting between fact and fantasy. They belonged to an institutional culture that valued precision. The same tradition that copied hymns and epics also preserved astronomical records accurate enough for modern scholars to align with actual eclipses and celestial patterns. They were trained to discern patterns and preserve them faithfully. This is the pressure point at the heart of the story. When the scribes turned their attention to the Anunnaki, they retained their precision. Across cities, centuries, and dynasties, broad features persisted: radiance, presence, scale, and bodily consequence. While details varied, the overarching pattern remained constant. This is why ancient clay archives hold such significance. In places like Nippur, excavators discovered rooms brimming with tablets, many administrative, yet among them were literary and religious texts of remarkable age. Later, in the British Museum, Mesopotamian tablets would rest behind glass, including the renowned flood tablet linked to the Epic of Gilgamesh. When George Smith translated it in the 19th century, the flood captured attention. Yet, hidden within those lines was a striking detail: the Anunnaki lifting torches, flooding the land with blinding light. This detail often escapes readers' notice, yet it elucidates why this tradition feels stubbornly resistant. This consistency becomes even more striking surrounding a challenging word in the record, melam, or its Akkadian form, melamu. Often translated as radiance, splendor, or terrifying brilliance, these terms only partially convey its essence. In these texts, this quality does not simply decorate, it extends outward. It fills rooms, floods landscapes, and overwhelms those nearby. The scribes were not merely conveying that divine beings inspired awe. They were describing a presence that altered the world. This becomes particularly evident in texts associated with Inanna, where radiance is not gentle beauty, but something overwhelming. The enigma deepens, for this radiance isn't always static. It can fluctuate, be granted, removed, and restored. In the descent of Inanna, power is stripped away layer by layer as she traverses the gates below. Among the possessions taken from her is that radiant force, as though it were not just a symbol of status, but a property tied to presence itself. As descriptions shift closer to the body, in the Babylonian tradition, Marduk is described with 4 eyes and 4 ears, and when he speaks, fire erupts. Regardless of interpretation, the specificity lingers. Ancient texts often wield grand imagery, yet this feels more precise than grand. Divine beings are depicted as larger than humans, not merely greater in authority, but different in scale. Even guidance for divine statuary suggests proportions diverging from the ordinary human form. The most unsettling part unfolds in the human reaction. When individuals approach divine presence in these texts, they do not merely pray or ponder, their bodies respond. They tremble, collapse, and grow heavy. In some royal hymns, kings describe their bodies failing before the divine. In lament traditions, the departure of sacred presence leaves weakness and disorientation. This shifts the tone of the record. It no longer reads as a distant theory about heaven. It resonates as memory shaped by sacred tradition, rooted in physical consequence. At this juncture, the narrative evolves again. Divine power is not just radiance, anatomy, or bodily effect. It begins to appear organized. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Humbaba is guarded by 7 auras, 7 distinct layers of force that can be stripped away one by one. This detail matters. Power is not portrayed as a singular, mysterious glow, but as layered, counted, and sequentially reduced, suggesting that divine force possesses this impression re-emerges in ritual and royal material, where Melamu can be granted, transferred, and passed through chains of authority. Power is not just worshipped, it is ordered. It descends and is assigned. For a civilization that intertwined heaven, kingship, law, and temple life, this coherence makes sense, yet it also leaves behind a perplexing silence. If divine power could be articulated in layers, degrees, and transfers, then the scribes were not merely preserving reverence. They were documenting a system. This is where modern scholarship reaches an unresolved edge. One framework interprets the gods as personified natural forces. Another sees the descriptions as sacred language, reflecting overwhelming presence. A third emphasizes faithful scribal transmission over centuries. Each explanation offers valuable insights, yet none entirely dissolves the tension. The natural force perspective grapples with exact anatomical detail. The symbolic interpretation struggles with procedural transfer. The historical literary viewpoint clarifies consistency, but raises a question. Why were these details significant? This may be the deepest question left in the tablets. Not whether the Anunnaki can be verified in modern terms, but what the scribes believed they were preserving, and why they did so with disciplined seriousness across centuries. Somewhere between myth, memory, ritual, and record, a portrait emerged that Mesopotamian civilization refused to let fade. And perhaps that's why this story continues to resonate. Humans have always existed between what they can measure and what they approach with wonder. The Sumerians built cities, tracked labor, studied the skies, organized power, yet left space for mysteries beyond comprehension. This truth remains vital. The most essential questions are often not solved. They require humility, patience, and discipline. This lesson can extend into life today. Not every uncertainty should be dismissed hastily, nor should every powerful experience be simplified immediately. Whether learning a language, studying history, or confronting life's uncertainties, growth often begins with the courage to linger on a difficult question. Curiosity, patience, and disciplined thinking can unlock doors that certainty never will. The clay remains, the names endure, the descriptions persist. The scribes are gone, but the questions they left behind linger. Not what modern people wish for the Anunnaki, but what the ancients believed they had seen clearly enough to etch into record. What part of this story resonates with you? The radiance, the physical descriptions, or the scribes themselves?